So you have a really interesting background. You are now a teacher. You were a college athlete, very high level athlete. You played defensive end at Carl State University. What was it like making the transition as a student athlete from high school to college?
About a month after I graduated high school, I was already in my first college class, which was just such a different world for me. The expectations that teachers had for students. And I remember specifically the first paper I wrote didn't go very well. And the football coach just wanted me to go in and talk to the teacher, just see like what they were looking for. And when I went in there, I was a nervous wreck. Talking to the teacher, my hands were shaking. I think the teacher at one point started to feel bad for me. And he did tell me what he was looking for. He wanted me to add more quotes. So on the next paper, that's what I did. But I got the same grade. So I practiced with the football coaches what I was going to say to the professor, say like, hey, we had this conversation about what you're looking for in a paper, and I added more of what you wanted, but I still got the same grade. The professor took one look at it, said, oh, you did add more. And then he changed my grade for me right there on the spot. But definitely the advocating, talking with teachers was a really big challenge for me. I was definitely more shy in high school, so trying to talk one-on-one with teachers was something I definitely had to work on and develop. And a lot of that came from just practicing, whether it was in the mirror with coaches, going through every single scenario I can imagine.
I love that because I know working with high school students, it feels sometimes babyish, like role playing. Like, how are you going to talk to your teacher? How are you going to talk to your professor? And the fact that you were a Division I college football player, actually practicing how to talk to your professors with your coaches, I think that's reassuring for a lot of us to hear.
Yeah, and it can be a really nerve-wracking thing to go in and advocate for yourself and talk one-on-one with those professors. But it's one of those things where the more I practice it, it felt more natural, more comfortable when the moment came for me to go in and advocate for myself. I think it definitely helped improve my performance in that class, getting the better understanding. And it's something that I carried with me. After every paper I wrote in college, I would always go in and talk to the professor about the grade, what they're looking for, and how I can improve it for the next one.
Well, practicing with that professor, do you feel like that transferred to you talking to the media or talking to the coach or whatever it was to be a student athlete? Because you had to talk to the media occasionally, right?
Yes, I definitely was not comfortable talking to the media. And I used to always dread playing against CU because I knew I was going to get interviewed being from Boulder and then playing for CSU.
Yeah.
I knew that interview was always going to happen every year. And yeah, it was one of those over time, I started to get more comfortable with the media. Even if you look at old interviews, freshman year, I'm more stoic, straight face, but junior, senior year, it's a lot more smiling.
And do you think that came from that actual role playing?
Yes. Helped me feel more comfortable in those situations and scenarios where if I didn't practice it, I don't know if I would have felt as comfortable talking to the media.
Yeah, it's one of those skills that, again, like it just feels really juvenile. Like let's practice how to talk to your teacher, your professor. It always feels weird, but I'm always trying to convince young student athletes or this transfers into job interviews, into different areas. If I was a sophomore or junior in high school right now, I'm a pretty good student athlete and I'm starting to get recruited. What advice would you have for me where I could figure out how to balance the academic with the athletic, with the social and everything else? Because people like me did not handle that well when we got to college.
One of the things that I would always do at the start of the semester is go through the syllabus, see what assignments are due, any big dates, make sure I mark them down on my calendar, make sure that I have all my materials ready for class, and try and map out as much as I can before the semester even starts. So that way I have a better idea of where I can add more free time or time for fun, because that's also important. So it was definitely trying to find that balance of making sure I have all of my obligations done of class, homework, football, but also allowing time for me to enjoy hobbies and things like that.
Yeah. So really working those, getting ready for being a student athlete, really working on the planning side.
Yes.
The planning side. And I don't think we ever work on that with young people. Like, I don't know about you. I never had anybody teach me how to plan stuff out.
It was definitely a more new concept to me. Throughout high school, I would just keep it all up here, which probably made things a lot tougher.
And I know when we work with students, when they get it out of their head, finally, you like see their shoulders drop. It just produces so much anxiety keeping everything in your head. And nobody believes you until it's like a full meltdown.
When I discovered that if I just spend 10, 15, 20 minutes to make a plan for that week, for the semester, it alleviates so much of that stress. And I have a better idea of what I need to do and when I need to do it by. And it actually allowed me to have more free time in the long run just because I was able to plan ahead and get things done.
What percentage of your team, the Division I football team, had the ability to plan their weeks out in advance when you got to college?
I would say maybe 10 to 15%.
And
that's being generous.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing of not only students I've worked with, but also like teams. It's in that 10 to 15% range. And the 10 to 15% who get it, they just have more free time. They just have a more enjoyable college experience.
Yeah, they do. And a lot of that too was figuring out how I am as a student, figuring out what types of things worked for me. So for example, study groups, I could never focus in a study group. I'd always get too distracted, want to talk to my friends. So I learned pretty quickly I have to study on my own. And one of the strategies that I enjoyed doing was creating study guides for a chapter, just because it made me think what the most important elements or concepts were that were taught to me. And that really helped me study and perform better on tests than when I was just studying in group settings or on my own, just reading through.
You'd read everything or you'd skim everything.
Yes.
And you'd get everything out into like a one pager or like a note card. Mm-hmm. That's what worked best for you.
Yeah.
Cool. So when you're playing University of Colorado or you're playing Boise State or whoever, how did you study the plan for that week? How did you study, the game plan?
They had a lot of similarities. We would have a sheet with different tendencies and things to look out for, with stands, different formations. And it was a lot of, watching film, things like that. Yeah, just looking at the statistics, seeing how often they run different plays, things like that. So there was a lot of crossover with how I would prepare for football with how I would study.
But one of the huge misses for most young student athletes is they think studying for school is different from studying plays or studying the game plan for the week. Learning is learning. Like, to become a good learner, it doesn't matter if you're studying for a chemistry test or you're studying a game plan. Like, it's the same methods that work for you. That is exactly what we're trying to implement. To become a great athlete, I would argue that you're not going to make it to Division I or professionals without being a great learner. We're trying to become a great learner, and that transfers. Is what I just said true? Like, you have to become a great learner to get to the highest levels of athletics.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that my older brothers told me was learn the playbook, because that's the quickest way to get on the field. Is if you know the playbook, you know what you're doing, that will get you on the field. You have to be a great learner and a student of the game. And a lot of those skills also transfer over to school settings, where you can take those same skills that you're using to learn and study football or whatever sport it is and apply it in the academic setting.
By your junior or senior year, do you feel like you had this student athlete thing down? And if so, what did that look like?
I would say more so junior year. I felt like I had a better grasp on my schedule. And what it ended up looking like was I would get all my work done kind of earlier in the week and then relax Wednesday, Thursday, Friday a little bit more, just because that's what I enjoyed doing before we would go have our games.
Yeah.
It felt more freeing, like I was able to go do fun things, but I also was happy and proud of the academic work that I was putting out as well, because I was doing well in school, attending all my classes, getting good grades, and my performance in football was also going well at the time. And I think a lot of that stems from coming into how I learn, the different factors and things that I need to do for me to be successful.
Yeah, and that's such an important piece. Self-assessment, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think that would have worked well for me, like front loading it all, going really hard academically on Monday and Tuesday, and then like really decompressing before the game. I would need more steady thing. But the fact that you looked at what you did and you're like, I'm performing better in this way, like that's the goal for every young person we're working with. Is there's no right way to do it. The right way to do it is the way that you're going to perform best on Saturdays. The advice I give is like after you play really well, or maybe just after every game, you look back at your previous week and you're like, okay, what did I do academically? What did I do athletically? Like you're always looking and like assessing. And you're like, wow, I played really well with this type of setup. I don't think a lot of us take the time to do that. Is that the right advice?
Yes, absolutely. So every Sunday I would go back, watch film, see things I did in the game, things that I can improve on, and just make a note of it for the week. But I'd also look at academics. How did I do on these papers? How did I do on this test, the quiz? Do I need to spend more time reading this week? Do I need to focus more on this area? Constantly reevaluating and self-assessing where I needed to put my focus was something that was really beneficial for me.
You are so good at that reflection piece. Where did you get that from?
Growing up, my family, after every game, whether it was basketball, baseball, football, whatever sport, they would always ask, like, okay, what are things that we did well and what's something that we can work on for next time? Celebrate the successes and what's something that you can improve on.
Love college football. You came to work at Untapped and worked with a bunch of kids and became an executive function expert. What are you doing now?
I'm currently teaching elementary school down in Estes Park, Colorado. Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy getting to work with students at a younger age so I can help them develop these skills for when they get older, just because I think these skills are used throughout their entire lives. And it's not just in academics. So helping them develop different executive function skills while also teaching them math, reading, writing has been such a joy for me to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. What grade do you teach?
4th grade.
Yeah, 4th grade. You have to be the tallest elementary school teacher.
I'm the tallest in 4th grade. I'm also the fastest in the class. So.
There you go. If you notice a kid has executive function deficits, what comes to mind immediately on something that you do that you're like, wow, this is really helpful?
One thing that I do is at the start of every class, we start with some sort of movement. That might look like a 3-minute video where they have to follow along and dance or do something silly, or I might have them run outside, run around the basketball court, come back in. And a lot of times my activities also have some type of movement built in, whether it's just they're standing up, moving around the classroom to different stations and just, getting them up and moving and interacting. So that's one of the key pieces that is a part of all of the lessons that I create. The other thing is just trying to differentiate and meet them where they're at, because every student has different needs. That's why I love this first month of school, because I get to observe how they learn. It helps me improve my planning phase of how can I meet them with where they're at? Like, where are any deficits?
You and I are both huge advocates of movement.
Yes.
Like the biggest.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest piece of pushback I get from teachers is they're really worried about behavior management.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you get all these kids moving, how am I going to get them back in focus? Because it feels really empowering as a teacher when you're sitting up front and all these people are looking at you and they're being good and they're not hitting each other and things like that. So if you're integrating movement a lot, what do you do to make sure the behavior doesn't get out of control?
So I am very strict through the first month of school, just with how we do things in the classroom, how we keep order, my expectations of them, because they're not mind readers. They don't know what I'm expecting of them. So I try and be overly explicit in every direction that I give. And I found that actually, if I see students starting to get distracted or anything, standing up and getting them moving really a lot of times helps them refocus and be able to sit down and be more attentive.
Yeah.
So I found more that allowing for those small movement breaks is saving me more class teaching time versus if I wasn't incorporating that movement piece.
Agreed. My response was, you don't have time not to move. Going back to something you said initially, which is so darn important, is your behavior management has to be almost overly explicit. And then you have to have a really quick response. Like if you're doing a movement break, let's say you're doing something where they're, tossing a tennis ball back and forth to each other. Yeah. Well, if a kid chucks at another kid, you have to be so fast at being here, be like, sit down. That's not what we do. Like It's almost an over response, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, it does. And one of the other things I like to do in my classroom is I just have one rule, and it's 3 words: do what's right. And it allows us for having different conversations at the start of the year so we can talk as a class and all get on the same page of, okay, how do we behave in the hallway? How do we line up? What does that look like? Just so it's also shared expectations in what they are thinking, and it just becomes more of a community feel with that all-encompassing rule, and us being able to have those different conversations about different things like throwing a tennis ball at another student or whatever it is. Yeah, after the whole summer, sometimes that takes a little bit of time for students to get back into school shape. It takes a while to get back into the routines of waking up early, going through the school day, and whatever extracurriculars they may have after.
I could just think about being someone in your class at that age. How comforting it would have been the fact that you're explicitly laying out what is right. Because I know growing up, I was like, do the right thing, or advocate to your teacher, or study. I didn't know what any of that meant. So the fact that you're taking the time up front to be like, here's what the right thing looks like in this class. Here's how to study in this class. Here's how to move in this class. A lot of kids with executive function deficits, we struggle in the gray. You're making things black and white for us.
It's just so beneficial for all students, and just the rest of the year seems to go more smoothly.
Agreed. It's never smooth, but more smooth.
But it's the start of the year is definitely always hectic, but it's a fun, exciting time of the year.
Teaching's an impossible job. You and I have talked about this before. You're
Yeah.
getting kids from so many different backgrounds, so many different beliefs, so many different ability levels. What you're doing is just creating an environment saying, this is how we do school in this environment. And it's best practice for all kids, but it's essential for some of your kids.
Yes.
In my world, one of the most challenging conversations is when teachers or parents say, well, they're in 5th grade, they should. Or they're a college freshman, they should be able to.
Yeah.
They should is killing us right now because they can't. It doesn't matter if they should or they shouldn't. You talked about meeting students where they're at. What does that look like?
So what that looks like is differentiating lessons. The first part is building that relationship, getting to have that rapport, and for me to get a better understanding of how my students think and just observe how they're learning, how they approach different subjects, just taking notes and seeing like, okay, this is what I think this student could work on, and just making lists, groups to differentiate. Differentiating is a really difficult thing.
You know it's going to be hard as a
Yes.
teacher. It's even harder than you ever imagined.
Yes.
And it can be done, but man, it's challenging.
It is a lot of work, but that's the role of being a teacher. Is we're there to help the students learn, and if maybe they might not be at a spot where they should be able to do something or should do this, should do that, it's about helping them get to that point, about meeting them with where they're at currently and filling in any spaces and helping them build up that confidence to learn and keep building.
You said you take a lot of time to build relationships.
Yes.
What does that look like for you? How do you do that in a busy classroom?
In a busy classroom, so at the start of the year, we do a lot of student and teacher games. One thing that I always enjoy doing is on the first day is I have them stand up, make eye contact with someone, walk to them, and then I say, all right, hold up a 1 or a 2. Those who are holding up a 1, not allowed to laugh at all. If you're holding up a 2, you're doing everything you can to make the person across from you laugh. And we do that, rotate a bunch, and it's just a fun activity that a lot of kids like. And there's always 1 or 2 that do their best not to laugh, but then I always get them in the end.
Yeah.
So just doing things like that. I do a lot of storytelling, and I want the students to also get to know me because I want them to be comfortable in my classroom and feel like they can come to me, ask me any questions, that it's okay to make any mistakes. I go play tag at recess.
The pushback from a lot of teachers that I know, and this isn't their fault, it's we have a lot of demands placed on us. Kids have to improve by all these standards, right?
Yeah.
It's hard enough to fit that in even without taking time to get to know your students or having these like quick little games. What would you tell the teacher that says, I don't have time to do this?
I would say those relationships and building them is so important for the whole school year that it's absolutely worth taking that time to build those up and create a classroom environment where every student feels safe, where they can learn, they feel comfortable. Because if that's not created at the start of the year, it can be really difficult for those students to get those marks and get the improvement that we're looking for the year. So I would say it's definitely worth it to take the time, get to know students, their different personalities. My students make me laugh every single day. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think is always worth it, and it pays off dividends in the long run for their learning.
Whether we think it's right or not, this generation of kids, they just don't learn from people they don't like. But a lot of times, like if you see them and they feel seen, they'll learn from you. But if they don't feel seen, they struggle.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I have students who now, a month later, after school started, they're starting to raise their hands way more frequently than they were at the start of the year. And yeah, it's one of those things that when I start to see that, that's when I know that time that we spent was worth it, because now they're in class, they're asking me questions, they're ready to learn, and they're also excited to learn.
Let's say you suspect ADHD or some type of thing where they just seem really scattered. What are other ways you meet kids where they're at?
With those students, we'll create some sort of signal that's just for me and that student. And a lot of times that signal will be, okay, go take a 5-minute walk in the hallway, come back, and we'll revisit. Or it might be, I don't understand something, like, please come over here and help. And spending that extra time, it make a lot of groupings specifically just so I know where I can help out the most, and I know which groups where they can maybe ask friends for help and get help that way, because there's only one of me in the classroom, unfortunately. So yeah, I wish I could help everyone equal amount all the time, but it's one of those things where it can be difficult having a lesson where I have 6 students who really all need my help, and they're all in different parts of the classroom. So grouping is one of the big ways that I'm able to focus and help differentiate for different students. And I'd say creating the little signals, whatever it is. Last year it was like peace signs or thumbs up or whatever silly little thing they want to do. It helps also build that relationship, and they know that I care and I understand how they're learning, and it's okay if they need to go take 5 if I see them starting to get frustrated or they're just stuck on a problem. Taking that break and helping them refocus a lot of times is really beneficial.
And I love that too. It's because you're teaching them how to advocate. You're building the base for that, but you're not making them admit defeat. Yes. Say like, hey, I don't know how to do this. I think it's a great method with younger students. Do you do anything else to teach them how to advocate or teach them how to learn, or anything else that would be really helpful for other people to hear?
At the start of the year, I put up a list of phrases on how they can ask different questions. And I found that is so beneficial, because a lot of times they might not even know how to ask a question. So having that list there for different topics and how they can phrase things is really beneficial. And I mean, I still hear students phrasing things the way that I showed them from the start of the year now.
It's great. I mean, how many people in college have we worked with that don't even have those phrasing things, right? So
yeah.
Give them the language is awesome. And you just have that poster in your class.
Yeah, so I have that in my class. One of the reasons why I have that is because for myself, I didn't know how to phrase a lot of those questions. So I think just having that there where they're able to read it and just take it in is such an important thing and can really help them out.
When students come off as disrespectful, 80% of the time, they just don't know how to be respectful. So giving them the language is just so helpful. We talked a lot about elementary school, but from like a middle school or high school level, is there anything you've seen that people have built relationships really successfully or taught students skills that they didn't have in a way that just really landed?
It's different from working with elementary students in ways where there's a lot more personality and individualism in those grades compared to elementary school. I've seen high schoolers completely change their lives with just taking the 15 minutes to write out a plan for the week. And I've seen how it can alleviate a lot of that stress that occurs in middle high school levels for academics, and just how freeing it is for those students to be able to sit down, have a plan, feel good about their week. They know what they're doing or what they need to do, where they need to be at. Seeing that click for students is such a special moment as well, because it just starts to change their life and allows them to do so many more things that they want.
Yeah, a lot of the frustration is that we don't know what to do and what's expected. Everyone's mad at us. We just don't know what to do. And so having that plan and having it very clearly laid out can be so helpful, and having that language can be empowering. You know, you're talking about building that relationship. When you have 100 students at a time versus 25, that can be more challenging. But one of the things I did is I would just end class a minute or two early. I would make sure I was at my door to greet every student that walked in. And again, you're only getting, maybe seconds with them, but at least they feel seen. A lot of them appear like they don't want to be seen, but they need to be seen.
Yeah, it allows them to be more comfortable in the classroom.
Is there any other words of wisdom you think you can give?
Executive function is it's a difficult task to take on, and it's not something that happens overnight. It takes a lot of time and effort. If you put in 100% effort and have a 100% attitude, you're going to see the results. It's not an easy task to take on. It is work to do, but the results and successes of that are worth it.
Yeah. And it's not linear. Everyone thinks it's going to be like a stair step. You've worked with enough students now. It's like you grind away at this for years, and then out of nowhere, it's like, who is this kid with all these organizational skills, right?
Yeah. It changes over time. And just like with anything, like with sports, the more you practice something, the better you're going to get at it. And that's kind of the mindset that I had a lot with executive function skills when I was learning about them. Was these are skills that I have to actually practice in order to become better at them. It's not just I can pick up a skill and be amazing at it right off the bat. It was something that I had to actively put effort in to change.
I have a belief that I'm like trying to scream as loud as I can in the world right now, that executive function skills we always equate to character, but they're not about character. Like if I'm late to something, people think I have poor character. If I don't turn something in on time, people think I have poor character. But working on these skills, it's kind of character development, but these skills aren't who you are. They're just skills.
There was one stat that always stood out to me, and that was with students that have ADHD, ADD, they hear so many more negative comments from teachers throughout their academic careers versus positive ones. To me, it's not something like those kids are purposely trying to do. They're not trying to be hyper or anything like that in my class. Like, they want to learn. It's about being able to show them the way to get there.
The stat that we always reference here is the typical kid with ADHD gets 20,000 more negative comments than positive comments by the age of 10. And this is why we get defensive and we get frustrated and we kind of go off the rails. But yeah, thank you for being a teacher that sees that it's not character, they're skills. Yes. Well, Joey, thank you so much for doing what you do for the world. It's super awesome, and we're all very grateful for that.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me today. I absolutely love and believe in what you guys do here, and it's so important for students and their growth.
So thank you so much.
Yep, of course.